So I'm going to talk about three books that I just read. They were all audiobooks. So I'm going to just kind of discuss that as well. And they were all mysteries, thrillers, kind of. Um, Now, all of these were sort of books that um, I had either heard really good things about or that had been recommended by like uh, um, I'm blanking on um, um, what it's called, newsletters that I follow. And so I don't want to say I went in with like high expectations, but I went in like expecting just to like think that these books were going to be really good. Um, and let's just say that I was let down. um, these books were not great. I've read some really good mysteries. I've read some really good mysteries, really good thrillers. These were not it. And so I just want to kind of talk about these books. Now, your results may have varied if you've read any of these books. You might have really liked them. So obviously, I'm not trying to say that, I am like you know, the master of deciding whether these books are good or not. I'm just saying that my personal opinion on them is that these books are not the best, mysteries or thrillers or anything. We are more than welcome to talk in the comments about how you felt about them if you've read them. But personally, I just felt that these were not that great. So the first one we're going to talk about is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. Now, this one, a lot of people at my bookstore absolutely loved. So when I went to recommend like a bunch of when I go to recommend like a bunch of books to people, a lot of people are like, "Oh, None of This Is True. Like I've already read that one, or have you read this one? It's really good." Now that's not to say that like I take everything that like a customer says at face value, because there are so many books that people recommend to me that I'm just like, mm-hmm, yeah, sure. Um, because I know that, like, me personally, I know I'm not gonna like it. There are just so many books out there that, like, I know that a lot of books are popular, but I know that they're not for me. um, uh, Sarah J. Maas books, super popular. Will never read them. Um, Fourth Wing, really popular. Didn't like them. So there are just some books out there that, I people love them, not for me. Happens all the time, actually. There are just books that are like really popular. I end up hating them. And I think this is one of those cases. None of this is true. Now, um, the concept of this book, if you don't know, is basically that this woman, it's two women, but one woman is basically, she has a podcast where she interviews these women who have gone through like really difficult times and have come out of it on the other end of it, um, and survived basically. But this other woman um, says, well, what if we decided to do a podcast where it's like the before of surviving it? We decide to make a podcast, and um, it's before anything bad has happened, and we kind of go through the motions as like she's deciding to change her life. And the pivotal moment that brings these two women together is that they're both at the same restaurant, as they're celebrating their birthdays, and they have the same birthday. They were born at the same hospital, and they're both 45. So they were born on the same day at the same hospital. Um, yeah, so that's what brings them together. Um, and so the podcast, they're kind of keeping it like undercover from their husbands. They're just deciding to call it like um, my birthday twin or something like that. Or I don't remember exactly, but basically that's what brings them together. And the thing that like kind of changes everything is that the one woman who is like the podcast guest is kind of not really, you know, being truthful about like why she's doing the podcast. She's like stealing stuff from the podcast host. And you know that like something's kind of weird because she like doesn't like the podcast host husband and is like trying to like do all sorts of things to like prove that the husband is bad and everything. So you know that like something's going on, and even from the synopsis, you know that like basically she's trying to like upend the podcast host's life or something like that. Now, for me, a good mystery thriller is one where like you can't predict what's gonna happen, or you don't really know like um, how the story's gonna end, or things kind of like um, come at you, and you're like, whoa, like I didn't know that was gonna happen, or what a good plot twist, or um, you can't really just the sequence of events aren't like linear. It's not really like, okay, this happens, this happens, this happens. You know, like that's just a fiction story to me. This book to me just felt like, okay, I could tell you exactly what was going to happen from the very start. Like none of it was surprising. All of it was just kind of like, okay, yeah, wow, yeah, okay, basically this one woman is doing this stuff and this other woman just kind of let her. I don't know, like none of it was just shocking. None of it surprised me. So I don't really get why anybody thought that this book was good, because you could predict everything from the beginning. I didn't think any of it was shocking. None of it made me go, wow, or I didn't. If I could gasp in a book, um, to me that's a good sign of a good like mystery book. Or if there's something that kind of happens that makes me kind of think, then that to me is the sign of a good like mystery. This book, I was just kind of sitting there going, waiting for something interesting to happen. Nothing interesting happened in this book for me. I just kind of kept thinking, okay, okay, okay. um, all of it was so predictable. um, you know, to me, I just felt like it was very formulaic. Um, yeah, so that's how I felt about None of This Is True. Then we're going to talk about Missing White Woman by Kelly Garrett. Now, this to me was pitched from a newsletter, like I said, and it was pitched as kind of a very interesting one where it talked about race relations, racism, where this woman wakes up, finds a dead body in her Airbnb. Her boyfriend is being accused of the crime, but then she also has to kind of get herself off the hook because she's also kind of being accused of the crime. And it really is dealing with like racism, and because she's a black woman, the main character is a black woman, and the obviously the person who's dead is white. And so it's really talking about how when white women are missing, um, you know, there's really like talk about how the spotlight gets pushed onto the white women when they're missing. Um, and it talks about that at the beginning of the book. There's like a quote about how like when white women are missing, there's like a media frenzy and stuff, like media circus for that. So that's really what I went in expecting. I really expected like a lot of discussion about race. I really went in expecting a lot of discussion about how like white women get more talk about them versus like black women or other people of color, other women of color. And I really expected more of a story about the main character being accused of the crime. Now, there was some discussion about racism, don't get me wrong, but none of that really had to do with the main crime. It really had to do with like a previous crime that had happened in the novel, or in the main character's story, I should say. And there really wasn't a discussion about like white women getting more media coverage. I mean, it was covered in the book, because there was a social media person on TikTok who was, kind of covering the story more than the police were. But it wasn't really like, I don't know, it just wasn't really like discussed in any way. Like the author or the main character didn't really like talk about how more white women would get coverage versus if this was a black woman missing kind of thing, or even just another person of color missing. And the main character wasn't really accused of the crime at all. I mean, she couldn't like leave the area, but that's just because the boyfriend was missing. And so they didn't want her to leave until they found the boyfriend who had been accused of the crime. And so I went in with like very different expectations versus what actually happened in the book. So That was one of my problems with it. And then also, like, the story was just kind of boring. Like, nothing really happened in the book. And so I just really wanted more to be going on. And then what ended up happening was just really bad. Um, because the end of the book, I was like, really, that's how this, wraps up. Okay, well, that's just dumb. I didn't really care about it. It was just a really boring book. I told my friend Christy, the same one who gave me the book, because we talk about books all the time, that the best thing I could say about this book was that the narrator was really good, and that it was a full audiobook production, and I liked that. And that really has nothing to do with the book at all. You can have a great audiobook and a great narrator for any book. It had nothing to do with the book itself. So yeah, I would recommend the audiobook, but not really the book itself. Yeah, but it was a great audiobook production, full audiobook production. And the narrator did do a great job, but that's about all I can say about it. And then finally, we have The Business Trip by Jesse Garcia. I think this one was another one that was recommended to me by that same newsletter. Now, don't get me wrong, this newsletter has not led me astray all the time. There are certain books that I have gotten from them that I have loved. So these are just some misses. Now, this one is about two women. One is escaping an abusive relationship. So she's leaving, and she gets on a plane and finds this woman who looks kind of like her, and this other woman that looks kind of like the one escaping the abusive relationship is going on a business trip. And now what ends up happening in the story is that the two women end up getting murdered by this guy, and that's kind of the basic of the book. Now the story kind of goes along, and you're trying to figure out, well, like, what happened, like, how did they get murdered, why did the guy murder them, and you're kind of following along with that. I don't want to say too much about it, just in case you do decide you want to read it. um, but um, it, um, it wasn't a bad book. It just was like the one character was absolutely wild, but it wasn't exactly like, whoa, wow, what a great story. This is so gripping. The plot twists are like so amazing. It was kind of predictable. I kind of could like sense what was going to happen. Um, and also there were a lot of like really random points of view, and I didn't really understand why we were getting these people's points of view. They just kind of felt unnecessary. Like, we would get a point of view from like the abusive person, like the abusive partner, and I was like, but why? Why do we need this person's point of view? It didn't really feel necessary. Or we would get like a point of view from, I don't know, just like someone else, and I was like, okay, but is this like pivotal to the story? Because like I don't really feel like this is pivotal to the story. Um, and it never really like made any sense even later on. So there were just like certain parts where I was like, okay, but like, why do we need all these people's points of view? And it was like a full audiobook narration. So we would get like all sorts of people's, it was a full cast, I mean. So we would get all sorts of people talking, and I was like, okay, but like, why did you hire all of these audiobook narrators um, if we don't really need them? I mean, obviously it's because of the way the book is written, but it was silly to me. Um, Bad editing, I guess. So again, I don't want to say too much, just because if this book sounds intriguing to you, you can kind of read it yourself. But it's kind of like, well, what happened with these women? But if you're interested, if you want to kind of know what goes on with it, I'd be more than happy to tell you. I just don't want to spoil it in case you do decide you want to read it. But it was just kind of weird. And then the ending was just kind of like, wow, that's a little bit eye roll worthy, because it was like the author was trying too hard to be like, oh, gotcha again. And I was like, but you didn't really get me, because at that point I just didn't care. And it really wasn't a gotcha moment. It was more like a you're trying too hard moment. So yeah, I just didn't love this one. And Yeah. So basically, three kind of crappy mystery thrillers. So hopefully the next mystery thriller I read will be better. I've read some really good horror books though. I read one that was really good. Gonna do a review on that one. Reading one right now that's really good. So hopefully I'll be able to talk about that one and have a good review on that one. And so yeah, I need a really good mystery thriller. So if you have one that you would recommend to me, please let me know in the comments.